Imagine standing at the edge of the world, where the land meets the endless horizon of the sea. There, in the silence between earth and sky, a figure kneels beneath an eternal burden. His arms strain, his shoulders ache, and yet he cannot rest. This is Atlas. For most of history, he's been remembered through one unforgettable image, a colossal figure bent beneath an impossible weight. But what exactly is Atlas carrying? Contrary to what so many statues and paintings suggest, it isn't the earth. The Greeks told a different story, one where Atlas bears the vault of the heavens themselves, keeping order in a world forever changed by war. Yet Atlas is more than just a titan punished for rebellion. In some tales, he is a king at the world's edge, in others, a guardian of the Hesperides, and in later traditions, even a teacher of mankind, a bringer of knowledge written in the stars. His story winds through the Titanomachy, through encounters with heroes like Perseus and Heracles, and into the very way we map and imagine the world today. This is the story of Atlas, the titan sentenced to hold up the heavens. Atlas was not just any titan. His roots lay deep in one of the most important bloodlines of Greek mythology, a family whose legacy stretched from rebellion against Zeus to the very shaping of human destiny. He was born the son of the titan Iapetus and the Oceanid Clymene. From their union came 4 brothers, each embodying a different aspect of human destiny: Prometheus, Epimetheus, Menoetius, and Atlas himself. Their names will appear again later, but from the beginning, Atlas was the one marked by strength, the strongest, the most enduring, destined to bear a punishment greater than any of his brothers could imagine. From the start, the Greeks saw these 4 siblings as more than just divine figures. They were symbols of humanity itself: cunning, folly, destruction, and endurance. Atlas was the one who carried the weight of survival, the eternal reminder that strength and suffering are inseparable. In Hesiod's Theogony, one of the oldest surviving sources of Greek myth, Atlas appears not as a king or astronomer, but simply as the titan burdened at the edge of the world. Already his role was unique. While other titans were cast into Tartarus in chains, Atlas's fate was different. He was singled out, not for cunning like Prometheus, nor arrogance like Menoetius, but for his sheer might. Only Atlas was strong enough to bear the vault of the heavens, and so only Atlas was condemned to do so forever. Even in his beginnings, Atlas was more than just a rebel. He was a figure set apart from the start, chosen, or cursed, to carry the heaviest weight in all of creation. The Greeks did not often waste words on the physical descriptions of their gods and titans, yet when it came to Atlas, his very essence was bound to his appearance. He was strength made flesh, a towering figure whose body was not carved for beauty but for endurance. Hesiod's verses describe him in simple, unadorned terms. Atlas, standing at the edge of the world, shoulders straining as he bears the weight of the heavens. No throne, no crown, no golden armor marks him as a king among titans. His identity is written instead in the unyielding lines of his body, forever bent beneath his burden. In him, the Greeks saw raw power chained to eternal labor. Later storytellers and artists gave this vision shape. Vase paintings and temple carvings showed Atlas with arms locked above his head, muscles taut as if he were both man and pillar at once. His posture was never relaxed, his stance never free. To depict Atlas was to show the endless straining of the body against the immovable weight of the sky. But over time, something changed. By the age of the Romans, and especially during the Renaissance, Atlas was no longer shown supporting the heavens. Instead, he bore the world itself. Marble statues and illuminated manuscripts portrayed him with a massive globe pressed to his shoulders, the entire earth, oceans, and continents alike balanced upon his back. It was not faithful to the old myths, but it was powerful, and the image endured. This transformation in art reshaped his legacy. The Titan once remembered for holding apart the heavens became the one who carried the world. It is this version that most people recognize today, Atlas as the weary giant stooped under the globe, a symbol of the crushing weight of existence itself. And yet, beneath these changing depictions, the truth of the Greek imagination remains. Atlas is not a figure of grace or ornament. He is the Titan of endurance, a body carved into living stone, forever caught between the sky and the earth. His form is less a portrait of a man than it is a monument to suffering. To understand Atlas, you have to look at the family he came from, a bloodline that shaped much of mankind's fate in myth. As we mentioned before, his father was Iapetus, one of the 12 original Titans. Unlike some of his brothers who embodied raw forces of nature, Iapetus represented the frailty of mankind, mortality, wounds, and the limits of human life. His presence in myth was often tied to the struggles and suffering that define the human condition. Atlas's mother was the Oceanid Clymene. She was gentler by nature, a daughter of the sea who embodied grace and nurturing. Where Iapetus symbolized mortality and hardship, Clymene brought balance with compassion and endurance. From them came 4 sons, each carrying a different face of human destiny. There was Prometheus, sharp-minded and cunning, remembered as the one who shaped mankind and stole fire from Olympus. He stood for foresight, intelligence, and defiance. There was Epimetheus, his opposite, whose very name meant afterthought. He was well-meaning but naive, accepting Pandora and her jar, unleashing suffering into the world. He stood for human folly and the consequences of poor judgment. There was Menoetius, the proud and reckless one. Consumed by violence and arrogance, he was struck down by Zeus and hurled into Tartarus. He embodied destruction and the dangers of unchecked pride. And finally, there was Atlas, the strongest of them all, marked not by wit, folly, or rage, but by the sheer endurance that would one day define his punishment. Together, these 4 brothers were known as the Iapetianides, and the Greeks often saw them as reflections of the human condition itself. Through this family alone, the Greeks explained much of mankind's struggle, the cleverness that lifts us up, the folly that drags us down, the arrogance that destroys us, and the strength that allows us to endure. But Atlas's ties did not end with his brothers. He fathered many daughters who spread his legacy across the myths of gods and mortals. Among them were the Hesperides, guardians of the golden apples that grew in a garden at the farthest west, a treasure even the gods coveted. Then came the Pleiades, 7 sisters transformed into stars who still shine in the night sky. Through Maia, the eldest of the Pleiades, Atlas became the grandfather of Hermes, the swift messenger of the gods, binding his line directly into the Olympian family tree. He was also father to the Hyades, nymphs of rain and sorrow, whose grief was immortalized among the constellations, and to Calypso, the nymph who entrapped Odysseus on the island of Ogygia. Through these children, Atlas's name reached from the depths of the sea to the very heavens above, stretching into every corner of the Greek imagination. In this way, Atlas's family framed both his downfall and his immortality. From his father, Iapetus, he inherited rebellion. From his brothers, he inherited struggle. And through his daughters, he scattered pieces of himself across the heavens, ensuring that even as he bore the sky, his bloodline was written among the stars. Atlas is remembered above all else for his strength and endurance, but his personality in myth is more nuanced than it first appears. Unlike his brother Prometheus, whose cunning and clever defiance left behind stories filled with dialogue and intrigue, Atlas rarely speaks in the sources that survive. His story is one of presence, not words, a titan whose very silence embodies the weight he carries. His role was not to plot or deceive, but to resist. Straining beneath the vault of the heavens, he became a living symbol of resilience. Where Menoetius had raged, Prometheus had schemed, and Epimetheus had blundered, Atlas endured. His personality was defined not by choice, but by necessity, by the simple truth that he could not set down what Zeus had placed upon his shoulders. Yet Atlas was not without agency. In some traditions, he is described as a ruler of the western edge of the world, suggesting a figure who was more than just a prisoner. But we'll leave that for a later chapter. His powers were immense, though not expressed through lightning, storms, or clever tricks. Atlas's power was his sheer, unshakable might. He could stand where others would fall. He could hold what others could not. Later myths even emphasized his intelligence, with writers crediting him as the first teacher of astronomy. If he bore the heavens upon his back, then he also studied their movements, their patterns, and their secrets. In this way, Atlas was not just the strength that held up the stars. He was the wisdom that read them. Here lies the paradox of Atlas, a titan punished for rebellion, yet remembered as a figure of cosmic necessity. Without Atlas, the heavens and earth might collapse into one another. Without Atlas, the boundary between above and below would fail. In him, the Greeks saw both rebellion and balance, suffering and order. His power was not flashy, but fundamental. He was the pillar on which the universe itself seemed to rest. To understand Atlas's burden, we have to return to the greatest war of the old gods, the Titanomachy. It was a battle not of men, but of immortals, a clash between the elder Titans who ruled under Cronus and the younger Olympians, led by Zeus. Atlas stood among the Titans, the children of Uranus and Gaia, who had ruled long before the Olympians were born. Unlike Prometheus, who foresaw the inevitable victory of Zeus and chose neutrality, Atlas did not step aside. He fought alongside Cronus, hurling his strength against the rising generation. His power was unmatched, his endurance legendary, and in the chaos of war, he proved one of the Titans' greatest champions. But Zeus had allies the Titans could not withstand. The Olympians freed the Hecaton-Kyries, the hundred-handed giants, and the Cyclopes, who forged for them weapons of unimaginable power. Thunder and lightning armed Zeus, a trident armed Poseidon, and a helm of darkness armed Hades. Against such might, even the strongest of the Titans began to falter. The war raged for 10 years, shaking the very foundation of the world. In the end, the Olympians triumphed. Many of the Titans were cast down into the black depths of Tartarus, chained in shadow and guarded by the Hecaton-Kyries. But Atlas's punishment was different. Zeus saw in him not only rebellion, but the raw strength that had made him dangerous. Where his brothers Prometheus and Epimetheus were spared, and Menœtius was struck down, Atlas was given a sentence that set him apart: to stand forever at the edge of the earth and hold the heavens upon his shoulders. This was no simple burden. Atlas was not carrying a stone, nor a mountain, nor even the earth itself, as later generations mistakenly believed. He bore the weight of the sky itself, the vast dome that separated the divine realm above from the mortal world below. Without Atlas, the heavens would collapse into the earth and order would fall into chaos. His punishment was both cruel and necessary, a reminder of rebellion, but also a service the world could not exist without. Hey everyone, before we continue, I've got some exciting news. My weekly video is now live on my new channel, Index Unknown. That's where I dive into the hidden side of history, the secrets, the theories, the conspiracies, the things they don't want you to know. The latest upload investigates Skinwalker Ranch, America's most infamous hotspot for UFOs, shapeshifters, and the paranormal. From glowing orbs and mutilated cattle to encounters with creatures that defy explanation, is it a true window into the unknown or just a web of stories that got out of control? The link's below if you're interested. Check it out after this video. When Zeus cast Atlas into his punishment, he was not hidden away like so many of the other Titans. Instead, he was fixed at the farthest edge of the earth, a place that stood between the known and the unknown. To the Greeks, this western horizon was a realm of mystery, the place where the sun sank each evening, swallowed by the sea, and where the path of mortals could go no farther. Here, Atlas was imagined standing with his feet upon the earth and his shoulders beneath the dome of the heavens. But later, storytellers and poets gave this exile another layer. Atlas was not only a titan bound to labor, but also a king. In some traditions, he ruled over this distant land, a realm rich in knowledge and guarded treasures. His punishment and his sovereignty became indistinguishable. A titan who was both a prisoner and a ruler of the world's edge. It is in this role that Atlas is most often connected to the Garden of the Hesperides, that enchanted orchard where golden apples of immortality grew. The Hesperides themselves were his daughters, and whether they guarded the fruit at his command or alongside him, the garden became a symbol of the wealth and danger of the far west. Travelers and heroes who reached this place stood not just in the presence of the Hesperides, but of Atlas himself, a figure who embodied both hospitality and hostility, depending on the tale. This vision of Atlas as master of the Western horizon carried enormous weight in Greek thought. The Western world was always tied to mystery, death, and immortality. It was the direction of the setting sun, the entrance to the underworld, and the border of what mortals could know. To place Atlas here was to make him a guardian of boundaries, a titan whose punishment became a cosmic necessity. He was the living frontier between earth and sky, between gods and men, between the known and the unknown. The story of Atlas does not end with his punishment. Even as he strained beneath the heavens at the western edge of the world, heroes of the next age crossed into his domain. Among the first was Perseus, the slayer of Medusa. After cutting off the Gorgon's head, Perseus wandered the world with his prize, the severed face that could still turn any living being to stone. His journey carried him westward, farther than most mortals had ever gone, until he came upon the land of Atlas. In some versions, Perseus arrived as a weary traveler seeking refuge. He asked Atlas for hospitality, invoking the ancient laws of Xenia, the sacred bond between host and guest. But Atlas, wary of prophecy, refused him. For it had been foretold that a son of Zeus would one day steal the golden apples of the Hesperides, apples that lay in the garden within Atlas's domain. Fearing that Perseus might be the one destined to fulfill this prophecy, Atlas denied him shelter. Angered by the insult, or perhaps desperate to protect himself, Perseus revealed the head of Medusa. In an instant, Atlas's towering frame stiffened, his skin hardened, and his form became indistinguishable from the mountains that rose behind him. Thus, according to the myth, the Atlas Mountains of North Africa were born, the Titan himself transformed into stone, a silent range of peaks holding up the sky for eternity. Other tellings soften the story. Some suggest that Atlas begged Perseus to show him the Gorgon's face, seeking release from his endless punishment. In this version, Perseus's act was not one of wrath, but of mercy, a gift that allowed the Titan to escape his suffering by becoming part of the earth itself. Whichever version was told, the meaning was the same. The encounter between Perseus and Atlas explained the presence of a monumental range of mountains in the distant west, their peaks stretching so high they seemed to touch the heavens. His suffering was written into the earth itself, a reminder that even the mightiest of the Titans could become part of the world they once defied. If Perseus brought Atlas into the world of stone, it was Heracles who tested the Titan's burden itself. Their encounter came during the hero's 11th labor, the quest to seize the golden apples of the Hesperides. These apples, hidden away in a sacred garden at the farthest west, were not only a divine wedding gift to Hera, but also symbols of immortality. Few even knew where the garden lay, and fewer still could hope to breach its defenses. Guided by his trials, Heracles reached the realm of Atlas, the one figure who knew the garden better than any other. For in many versions, it was his daughters, the Hesperides, who tended it. But Heracles also knew that the garden was guarded by Ladon, a serpent coiled endlessly around the apple tree, fangs bared against intruders. Rather than facing the serpent directly, Heracles turned to Atlas with a plan. He asked the Titan to fetch the apples on his behalf. Only Atlas could pass freely into the garden, for it was his own daughters who guarded it. But there was a price. While Atlas sought the fruit, someone had to bear his burden. Heracles agreed. With a feat of strength that tested even him, he braced his body and took upon his shoulders the weight of the heavens. For a time, the sky no longer rested on Atlas, but on the back of Zeus's mortal son. Atlas, relieved of his eternal punishment, strode into the garden and claimed the apples. When he returned, golden fruit in hand, he was not eager to resume his old place. Instead, he offered to deliver the apples himself, telling Heracles that he would continue to bear the heavens in his stead. In that moment, Atlas's cunning revealed itself, for after centuries of labor, he had no desire to bow once more beneath the sky. But Heracles was no fool. He nodded, pretending to agree, and asked only for a brief reprieve. If Atlas would take back the heavens just for a moment, Heracles said, he could adjust his cloak and cushion his shoulders to better endure the weight. Atlas, unsuspecting, lifted the sky once again, and in that instant, Heracles seized the apples and left, abandoning the Titan to his fate. This story shows us a rare glimpse of Atlas, not merely as a passive bearer of punishment, but as a figure who longed for freedom, who schemed for escape. For a fleeting moment, he had been free of the heavens, only to be tricked back into bondage by a hero whose strength was matched by his wit. In the meeting of Atlas and Heracles, two truths stand side by side: the burden of the Titan, eternal and unchanging, and the cunning of the hero, who turned even Atlas's brief freedom into another tale of triumph. Though most stories cast Atlas as a figure of brute endurance, some later traditions remembered him in another light, not as a silent sufferer, but as a teacher of the stars. Writers like Diodorus Siculus in the 1st century BCE described Atlas not only as strong, but also as wise. In these accounts, Atlas was credited with discovering the movements of the heavens, mapping the constellations, and teaching mankind the science of astronomy. This was more than just a poetic flourish. If Atlas bore the heavens upon his back, then who better to study their secrets than the Titan who held them closest? Here, Atlas becomes something more than a punished rebel. He transforms into a culture bringer, a figure whose suffering gave him knowledge. With the dome of the sky resting on his shoulders, he could chart the rise and fall of the stars, trace the path of the sun, and predict the turning of the seasons. His wisdom, like his punishment, was eternal. This reimagining was not without purpose. By the classical and Hellenistic periods, Greek thought often sought to soften older myths of monstrous titans, reshaping them into figures tied to civilization and knowledge. Prometheus had brought fire to mankind, and now Atlas was remembered as the one who brought them the stars. It is no coincidence that so many of his children became constellations. The Pleiades sparkle in the night sky as companions of Artemis. The Hyades mark the rainy season. Even the Hesperides, though not stars themselves, were tied to the western horizon where the sun dies each day. The heavens Atlas bore were not only a burden, they were also a canvas on which his family was written. To study the stars was, in a sense, to study Atlas himself. Of all the Titans, Atlas may be the most widely recognized. His image appears on statues, paintings, maps, and even the names of books. Yet for all his fame, his story is also one of the most misunderstood. We touched on this part earlier, but let's dive a little deeper. The Greeks were clear in their earliest writings. Atlas carried the sky, not the earth. He was a living pillar separating heaven from earth, his strength the only thing holding back the collapse of creation. Hesiod, Pindar, and Apollodorus all describe his burden in the same way, the dome of the heavens pressing down upon his shoulders. But in later centuries, this detail began to shift. By the time of the Romans, and especially during the Renaissance, artists reimagined Atlas not with the heavens, but with a massive globe upon his back. In these depictions, the globe was the earth itself, oceans and continents carved upon its surface. The mistake was simple but powerful. The Titan who held up the sky was transformed into the Titan who carried the world. This reinterpretation proved so striking that it eclipsed the original myth. Sculptors carved Atlas with the earth on his shoulders. Maps and manuscripts adopted his image as their emblem. Eventually, entire collections of maps came to be called atlases, as if all the world's geography rested upon the back of the weary Titan. The transformation speaks to something deeper in the human imagination. To the Greeks, Atlas had been the divider of realms, the eternal guardian between heaven and earth. But to later generations, he became a symbol of burden itself, the crushing weight of responsibility, the endless task of carrying the world. In this way, Atlas was not only reinterpreted, but universalized. He was no longer just a Titan of Greek myth. He was the image of endurance that could belong to any age. Even today, when most people hear his name, they imagine Atlas locked beneath the earth, not the heavens. The misconception has become part of his legacy, reshaping him into something larger than his original myth, a figure who represents both punishment and the human struggle against impossible weight. And so Atlas remains, at the edge of the world, beneath the vault of the heavens, his back braced against eternity. A titan of rebellion, a ruler of the West, a teacher of the stars, and above all, the bearer of a burden that will never be lifted.